NATO allies are suddenly refusing to send warships to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz, leaving the United States to shoulder the burden alone after its joint strikes with Israel triggered Iran as closure of the vital oil route. If this reluctance continues, American forces could remain overstretched for months, global energy prices would stay dangerously high, and the entire transatlantic alliance might fracture beyond repair at the worst possible moment. Yet behind this apparent collective hesitation by Europe lies a calculated great power realignment, where Washington is now directly pressing China to step in or face escalated trade and security costs, revealing the true strategic contest over energy flows, Indo-Pacific dominance, and the future shape of global alliances. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. The timeline could not be clearer. On the 28th of February 2026, the United States and Israel launched epic anger strikes that eliminated Iran, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, and crippled key Revolutionary Guard facilities. Iran responded within hours by declaring the Strait of Hormuz closed to commercial shipping, placing roughly 1/5 of global daily oil supply at immediate risk. President Trump immediately called on NATO allies, as well as Japan, South Korea, France, and even China, to contribute naval assets, minesweepers, frigates, anything that could help escort tankers and reopen the waterway. The request was framed as simple burden, sharing those who benefit from stable oil prices should help secure the route. The response from Europe was swift and blunt. Germany's chancellor stated flatly that this war has nothing to do with NATO. The United Kingdom, despite long-standing special relationship ties, signaled no plans to deploy ships. France offered rhetorical support but ruled out combat involvement. Italy and Spain expressed similar reluctance. Within days, multiple NATO capitals had quietly informed Washington that domestic politics and stretched budgets made participation impossible. Trump's public frustration boiled over on Truth Social and in interviews, warning that failure to help would mean a very bad future for the alliance and reminding Europe of decades of American security guarantees. Yet the more he pressed, the more unified the European no became. This is not the first time allies have hesitated, but the scale and timing make it different. For years, European leaders have quietly reduced their naval presence in distant theaters, focusing instead on the Baltic and Mediterranean. Defense budgets, even after recent increases, remain below the new 5% GDP target many pledged at the Hague summit. Public opinion across the continent, already weary from Ukraine support, views the Hormuz crisis as America's and Israel's problem. German media openly called it not our war. British officials cited domestic budget constraints. The result is a collective dropping of the ball that leaves the United States facing the prospect of prolonged solo patrols in waters thousands of miles from home. What makes the situation even more delicate is the parallel pressure Washington is now applying to China. In the same week Trump demanded European ships, he also floated the idea of delaying his planned summit with President Xi unless Beijing used its influence to help reopen the strait, perhaps by quietly discouraging Iranian escalation or even contributing technical support for demining. Chinese diplomats responded with their usual calm, calling for restraint on all sides while continuing to buy discounted Iranian oil through alternative routes. The message was unmistakable. Beijing sees no reason to bail out Washington's Middle East entanglement. Behind closed doors, American officials have begun linking Chinese cooperation on Hormuz to other files, tariffs on Chinese EVs, technology export controls, and even arms sales to Taiwan. The pivot is clear. When Europe steps back, Asia becomes the new pressure point. The economic stakes are immediate and brutal. Brent crude has hovered near $120 a barrel since the closure began. European factories are already cutting shifts because of higher energy costs. American consumers are feeling it at the pump. Global shipping insurance rates have tripled for Gulf routes. If the strait stays blocked another month, economists warn of a potential global recession that would hit Europe harder than anyone else, precisely the outcome the allies are trying to avoid by staying out of the fight. Yet their refusal only prolongs the pain. Inside Washington, the mood is one of quiet recalibration. Senior Pentagon officials have confirmed that several Fathad batteries originally destined for Asia have been redirected to the Gulf. Aircraft carrier groups that might have deterred moves near Taiwan are now tied down escorting tankers. The message to Beijing is subtle but unmistakable. If Europe will not share the load, then China must either help or accept the consequences in its own backyard. This is classic realpolitik in action. When one set of allies disappoints, another theater becomes the lever. The deeper game, however, goes beyond immediate oil flows. For years, China has quietly expanded its influence in the global south by positioning itself as the reliable alternative to Western pressure, by staying on the sidelines in Hormuz while still securing its own energy needs. Beijing is demonstrating exactly the kind of strategic patience that frustrates Washington. At the same time, European hesitation is accelerating long-standing American doubts about the value of NATO in its current form. Trump has already floated the idea that the United States no longer needs the alliance if it refuses to pull its weight. Whether rhetorical or real, such statements are being noted in Beijing as evidence that the transatlantic relationship is fraying, creating openings for China to court individual European capitals with trade deals and technology partnerships. This moment, therefore, marks more than a logistical dispute over who patrols the strait. It is a live stress test of the post-World War II order. The United States built its global position on the assumption that allies would follow its lead in crises when they do not. The only remaining card is direct pressure on the rival power, China, that benefits most from American distraction. The coming weeks will show whether that pressure produces results or merely accelerates the very fragmentation Washington fears. The coming weeks will show whether that pressure produces results or merely accelerates the very fragmentation Washington fears. This moment carries an unmistakable echo of the 1956 Suez Crisis, when Britain and France attempted to seize the canal without full American backing and were forced into humiliating retreat once Washington withheld support. Back then, the lesson was that the United States could discipline its allies through economic pressure. Today, the script has flipped. The allies are the ones quietly walking away, leaving Washington to discover the limits of its own leverage. European capitals remember how American LED interventions in Iraq and Afghanistan dragged them into costly wars with little strategic return. They watched Washington pivot to Asia under Obama, abandon Afghanistan under Biden, and now demand naval commitments in the Gulf, while simultaneously threatening tariffs on European goods. The accumulated resentment has produced a quiet but firm consensus. This time, Europe will sit it out China. By contrast, is playing a patient, long game that frustrates Washington precisely because it refuses to be drawn into the drama. Beijing has not condemned the U.S. Israeli strikes outright. Instead, it has called for restraint on all sides, while quietly increasing purchases of discounted Iranian crude through overland routes and third-party tankers. Chinese state energy firms are already offering spot cargoes to traditional European and Asian buyers at prices that undercut the panic premium. The message is subtle but unmistakable. While the United States expends blood and treasure to reopen a waterway, China secures its energy needs and expands its influence in the global south without firing a shot. This is the same playbook Beijing has used in the South China Sea and with Belt and Road partners, strategic patience combined with economic inducements. The pivot to pressuring China therefore reveals a deeper structural shift in American strategy. When traditional allies prove unreliable, the only remaining lever is the rival power that actually benefits from American distraction. Linking Hormuz cooperation to EV tariffs, technology controls, and Taiwan arms sales is classic transactional diplomacy. Yet the danger is that Beijing may calculate it can afford to wait Washington out. Chinese diplomats have privately told intermediaries that any summit delay would simply confirm America's unreliability as a negotiating partner. The result is a high-stakes game of chicken, where neither side wants to blink first. Inside Europe, the refusal is not just about budgets or public opinion. It reflects a profound reassessment of security priorities. Germany, as new chancellor, has repeatedly stated that Berlin's focus must remain on the European theater and energy independence through renewables and LNG from Norway and the United States. France sees the Gulf crisis as an opportunity to sell more nuclear technology and Airbus aircraft to Gulf states rather than risk naval entanglement. Even the United Kingdom, traditionally more Atlanticist, is constrained by domestic politics and stretched naval resources already committed to the Indo-Pacific. The collective European calculation is that the United States will eventually handle the problem alone, as it has done in previous Gulf crises, and that staying out minimizes both financial costs and domestic political blowback. This dynamic is quietly reshaping the transatlantic relationship in ways that will outlast the current crisis. Trump's public warnings about a very bad future for NATO are being taken seriously in European foreign ministries. Some capitals are already exploring bilateral security arrangements with Washington that bypass the alliance altogether, while others are accelerating defense cooperation within the EU itself. The old assumption that Europe would automatically follow American leadership in distant theaters is dissolving. In its place is emerging a more conditional partnership where Europeans demand reciprocity and Washington learns the limits of unilateral demands. For China, the situation offers both risks and opportunities. The risk is that prolonged high oil prices could slow its own economic recovery and complicate relations with energy-dependent partners. The opportunity lies in demonstrating reliability. While the United States struggles to assemble a coalition, Chinese diplomats are quietly brokering back channel talks between Tehran and Gulf states, positioning Beijing as the indispensable mediator. If Washington's pressure on China produces only modest concessions, Beijing will have shown that it can withstand American leverage without sacrificing its strategic autonomy. Looking further ahead, two broad scenarios are taking shape. In the first, sustained American naval presence eventually forces Iran to reopen the strait, but at the cost of further alienating Europe and accelerating China's influence in the global south. NATO emerges weakened, perhaps formally intact but practically hollowed out. In the second, more dangerous path, the crisis drags on, oil prices remain elevated, European economies suffer, and transatlantic recriminations intensify. Washington doubles down on Asia-centric pressure, potentially triggering a broader decoupling that harms everyone. Either way, the old post-1945 order is cracking under the weight of its own contradictions. The deeper philosophical question this episode forces us to confront is whether alliances built on shared values can survive in an era of pure transactional interest. For 70 years, the United States underwrote global security in exchange for deference. When that deference evaporates, the guarantor discovers it has become the supplicant. China, unburdened by such historical commitments, can pick and choose its engagements with surgical precision. The Hormuz standoff is therefore more than a shipping dispute. It is a live demonstration of how power is shifting from the Atlantic to the Pacific, from collective defense to selective engagement, from ideological solidarity to cold calculation. Friends, we have traced the refusal of European allies, the pivot to pressuring China, the historical parallels, the economic stakes, the strategic recalibrations, and the long-term implications for global order. What remains is for all of us to watch how this high-stakes poker game plays out. History rarely offers second chances to redefine the rules of alliance, yet this moment feels exactly like one. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe Europe's refusal marks the beginning of NATO's gradual irrelevance, or will Washington find a way to bring its allies back into line? How do you see China's patient strategy ultimately affecting the balance of power in the Middle East and beyond? Which aspect of this unfolding great power contest concerns you most for the future of global stability? Share your perspective below, and let us continue the conversation together. Thank you for staying with me through this extended deep dive. I will see you in the next video where we turn to the next chapter of this rapidly changing era.